This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're going to share an interview we recorded with New York State Senator James Skoufis, an Orange County Democrat, immediately after the culmination of the New York State Democratic Party convention in Syracuse in early February. Well, Senator, thanks so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime for you.
So, for starters, I'm curious, how many of these types of conventions, whether it's state or national for the Democratic Party, have you gone to?
Counting this one?
Sure.
One.
Really?
It's my first one.
Were you surprised by anything about this, aside from how small the space was, given the number of people that were here?
I think the confetti was the most surprising thing.
Sure.
The outcomes were, I think, fairly predictable.
Yes.
The many speeches were fairly predictable, even though I've never been to one of these things before. And so, look, the energy was great. And I think that's the most important piece here, other than the outcomes, which have a meaningful impact on how everything moves forward over the next few months. But the party's very energized. The party's very almost completely unified. And that bodes well for Democrats in November.
Yeah, so this event was exclusively about the statewide candidates and getting them onto the ballot, but you are a down-ballot Democrat in a purple district, and I'm curious, how do you see the momentum out of this being harnessed in a meaningful way for Democrats like yourself in purple districts, whether it's the Assembly, the Senate, or even Congress? Yeah,
well, look, there are two things that the statewides and the state party need to do, and I believe will do, to help down-ballot folks like myself. One, we need to see this year what we saw 2 years ago from the state committee, and I think everyone fully expects that, and that is a significant investment in building out infrastructure in every corner of the state. That's field offices, that's full-time organizers, it's soup to nuts. That helps everybody. And then the second, certainly, is the better the top of the ticket does,
sure,
the easier it is for those of us down ballot to either match or exceed that performance. And so, there are candidates like myself who have been able to run ahead of the top of the ticket historically.
You don't say.
I do say.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you hit a ceiling.
Sure.
And, there's not a single candidate in the state who can run, 25 points, 30 points ahead of a ticket. If you're really strong, maybe you can run 10, 15 points. Certainly, though, if in Orange County, like where I'm from, if the governor sort of breaks even, that's a huge win from my perspective.
Sure.
That means I should win fairly comfortably. And so those are the two things that we need. We need a strong top of the ticket, and it seems like everyone in this room is excited to get to work to make sure, to the extent practicable, that we produce a really strong outcome at the top of the ticket. The national environment is where it is, which is extremely helpful for the top of the ticket. And then certainly we've got to build out that infrastructure.
Well, we heard from the governor today. She made her case, essentially, and sort of previewed what her campaign is going to look like. What were some of the elements that you heard that you think, yep, let's lean into that on the campaign trail? And was there anything where you heard and thought, maybe let's not talk about that in the purple districts?
Well, one thing that she said, almost sort of in passing at the end, I think it might have been off script, was we need to make sure we don't do anything crazy in state government this year, and certainly, do no harm is important over the next 5 months in legislative session and during the budget. But in terms of affirmatively doing things, the two themes are public safety and affordability, and she struck those notes frequently in her remarks. The data speaks for itself on public safety. Crime is way down in almost every single sector, in almost every region of the state, and we have to, as best as we can, get that message to break through. And sometimes that's been a challenge for us. We've oftentimes, as Democrats in New York, lost the narrative around public safety, even when the numbers and the data underscored our position. And so that's certainly one. And two, look, her budget that she proposed a few weeks ago is very focused on affordability. We're going to do our best to build on those proposals in the legislature, and hopefully we have a budget that meaningfully speaks to insurance premiums, meaningfully speaks to childcare, and these other issues that have become now part of the conversation.
It's unlikely, though, that anything you do in 2026, with probably a few exceptions, is going to have a real substantive impact on people's lives prior to Election Day. So is it not just about taking those actions, but then the messaging around that and pushing the heck out of that message?
Yeah, that's what campaigns are for. Campaigns are about making sure you get your message out in an effective way that breaks through to voters on salient issues. And so the saliency of the issues are there. We need to make sure that the narrative that, and to your point, the effectuation of things that we adopt in a given year sometimes take 9 months or 12 months or 18 months before people actually see the thing that we did in the previous year. And so we've got to make sure that we get our narrative out that, we just adopted this January 1st next year, July 1st next year, whatever the date is where this all becomes effectuated, childcare, UPK,
sure.
that we do make sure that voters are seeing and hearing that.
Well, in addition to your official government role, you also have a role with the National Democratic Party, and I'm curious whether you see them needing to play a role in New York's elections, and if that is the case, what does that look like? What should the county and state party here in New York look to the National Democratic Party for?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One is resources,
sure.
which is everyone wants more resources, whether you're a county party, a state party, and if you're the national party, you want resources from donors. So under the current chairman, we have made the decision, he's made the decision, to inject more money to state parties than ever in the history of the DNC. He himself is a former state party chair out of Minnesota. He led the national group of Democratic state party chairs prior to becoming chair of the DNC. And so this is where his heart and soul is, and he's put his money where his mouth is.
Sure.
And so literally we're talking tens of millions of additional dollars have flowed to states. There's been a greater percentage increase to red states for obvious reasons and purple states, but even in blue states like New York, we are deriving millions of additional dollars from the DNC than we were getting prior to Ken Martin becoming chair. So resources is number one. Two is, look, ultimately our brand is set in many ways by what happens nationally, by what happens in Congress from the Democrats there, what happens out of the DNC nationally. Yes, certainly we do everything we can to make sure that we have a specific brand and it is as strong as it can possibly be here in New York State or in Orange County where I come from, or if you're a candidate, you're a candidate's brand. But the Democratic Party brand is in large part set by the National Democratic Party. And so we're just talking about messaging, just talking about saliency. We have to do everything we possibly can out of the DNC and the National Party to make sure that we're improving upon our severely damaged brand, I think, if we're being objective and fair. That's where things are. We're politically, Trump is the best thing that's happened to us electorally. We are winning so many of these elections because he's inflicting so much harm on the American people, and people see that. But there will be a post-Trump world eventually, one day, and we're not just going to be able to rely on, well, we're not Donald Trump, we're not doing the things that he's doing, and we've got to make sure that we bolster our brand in such a way where our favorables are not in the 20s or 30s percentage points.
Well, lastly, I want to come back to that issue of energy. And when we talked about things like affordability and public safety, I think it's fair to say that a lot of that is targeted to that middle, those persuadable voters who might otherwise vote Republican or not vote at all. But there are also those Democratic voters or potential Democratic voters who we saw got very energized with now New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani's primary last year, and with a, say, play it safe budget, for example, and a do no harm approach to the legislative session. Are you concerned at all about an enthusiasm gap, or is Donald Trump as a boogeyman for the Democratic Party a big enough motivator?
It is a major motivator. I don't know that it's big enough. Certainly to date in all the special elections in our November races at the local level last year in New Jersey and Virginia in November, clearly he was a major motivator.
And in 2018, we've seen this movie before.
That's right. And so look, at the end of the day, we are going to have a session here that in some way, shape, or form addresses the abuses of ICE and the horrors we're seeing in the immigration space right now. So when we say do no harm, yes, we're going to try and do no harm politically and governmentally, but we are going to do a lot of things. Now, since 2008, Obama's first election, every subsequent race since then, midterm and presidential, our Big Ten party has shrunk a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, to the point where this previous presidential cycle, we lost the Teamsters Union, we lost the Firefighters Union, we lost both Orthodox Jews and Arab Americans due to our inability to really break through on the Gaza war. And really what we need to do is make sure, whether you agree with Zoran and the leftist wing of the party or not, we should all want them in the party, and they should feel like they have a seat at the table. Now, by virtue of being mayor of the largest city in New York City, I think by default you get a seat at the table.
Sure.
And so I don't think we have to worry about like providing a voice to a wing of a party that sometimes probably is felt like they don't have a meaningful voice within the Democratic Party. They do now. And so it's really making sure that we can, at the end of the day, talk about and debate our differences on how to get to certain outcomes. And, childcare is a perfect example. We all want to do more childcare in the Democratic majorities in the legislature. And certainly the governor has put that on the table. Zoran, it's a big issue for the mayor of New York City. The conversation is now going to be about the details of that child care proposal. Should we be doing, and by the way, the answer is yes, should we be doing more outside New York City on child care? How should it be delivered? Is it the county? Is it not-for-profit? So those are the debates right now that we're having that are healthy debates. I think the tax issue is going to be the one visceral,
there's going to be some hurt feelings there.
There are going to be some hurt feelings there. But guess what? The Senate and Assembly one-house budgets in previous years have always put PIT, personal income tax increases, in our budgets. And so we've had this debate before. It's not a new debate.
Sure.
There's some new players in the debate. But at the end of the day, we've got to unify. And at the end of the budget, at the end of session, then go out to the voters and talk about the things that we did, regardless of who won on the details.
Well, Senator, thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you, Dave.
And that was our conversation with New York State Senator James Skoufis, an Orange County Democrat who serves on the Democratic National Committee, immediately following the State Democratic Party convention in Syracuse earlier this month. Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell & Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.